So Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights, I can say that it has two key foundations. The first one was in 1996 when ordinary members of the legal profession concerned about the deterioration of the human rights and rule of law situation in the country formed a voluntary association, Lawyers for Human Rights. And the way in which we were working was to share information about events that we'll be tracking annually at the Law Society Summer School. And it proceeded like that until about 2002, when the situation in the country really got bad, and a decision was made by the voluntary association that we needed to institutionalize. What does that mean? It meant we needed a country that respected human rights, that respected good governance, that was underpinned by respect for the rule of law. What does that mean? It also meant that the rule of law would mean that we needed a strong legal profession that was pro-human rights. We also needed a strong and independent and impartial judiciary. Those are the primary reasons why we established Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights, so that there can be access to justice to all Zimbabweans who felt that their rights were being affected.
We had an executive secretary with a complement of staff that was quite sizable. We had a board of directors that was numbering maybe close to 10, and it was beginning to be very, very effective. But what we noticed that it was limited in its geographical space, in that it operated only in Harare. I discussed this issue with the then Executive Secretary Arnold Tsunga and said, human rights challenges and the culture must be for the whole of Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights also continued with its work of supporting human rights defenders who came in conflict with the law, particularly those that were involved in asserting their right to peaceful protests, especially considering the deterioration in the economic environment. In 2016, over 670 people were arrested and assisted by ZLHR to assert their right to fair trial after they were arrested for protesting. The protests were linked to the deteriorating standards of living because of the economic mismanagement. And then in 2019, again, there were protests that happened between January and where at least 1,400 people were arrested by the police in a very arbitrary manner. They were all assisted by ZLHR to be able to defend themselves in the courts of law. This was linked to protests over the increase in fuel prices. Other than assisting human rights defenders, Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights has continued with this work of supporting other victims of human rights violations, particularly those that fall victim to police brutality and also the brutality of the military.
When Jesina Mkoko was arrested, I was one of the first lawyers to be conducted. So we went and looked for her at the police station. We could not find her. And the police were refusing that they had arrested her. But we knew that it was the police who had abducted and kidnapped her together with other state security agents. So we went to the High Court and obtained an order for the police to produce her and to bring her to the High Court. So eventually, after a long time of disappearance, Jesina Mkoko was then brought into the open. She was then taken to court. We challenged the authority of the state to prosecute a person who had basically been kidnapped, abducted, and disappeared, and tortured while in their custody. So we took this matter up to the Constitutional Court and raised the issue that Jesina Mkoko was not supposed to be prosecuted because she had been tortured, she had been kidnapped and made to disappear, but the torture also was perpetrated in order to extract a confession. And the Constitutional Court ordered a permanent stay of prosecution on the basis that she had been extremely tortured in order to extract a confession for an offense that had not been committed. So this is how Jesina Mkoko's case was disposed of.
It's part of the human rights defense work to get harassed from time to time. I had been arrested before, but had never been lodged in prison. I had been beaten up before. I had been harassed in a whole lot of other ways. But 2013 is when I actually was lodged at Chikurubi, and I spent 8 days under arrest before getting bail from the High Court, because as has become the norm, the Magistrates Court no longer gives human rights defenders bail at first instance. So I only got relief when the High Court intervened. It helps that I knew what to expect as someone who had dealt with the system for a long time. So not a lot of things were shocking for me. And, you know, I was received very well when I went to prison. I was treated very well in prison. I was allowed to help inmates who needed legal assistance. So it was a time very well spent in that I did interventions that I otherwise would not have been able to do. And also it gives you, you know, the other side of that door in the courtroom when the magistrate says remanded in custody. You now have personal experience what it means for your clients to go behind that door, what it means to get into that prison truck and go to the to prison.
So you may recall that Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights was called upon to assist in the matter involving 29 MDC activists who were arrested for allegedly for killing a police officer in Glenview. It was a long trial. There were several human rights violations from the very time that these persons were arrested to the very last minute when some of those accused persons convicted were set free by the Supreme Court. And during that trial, so much happened which involved the process of ensuring that every right that these accused persons could enjoy was enjoyed, and to make sure that they obtained their freedom, that they were treated fairly, that they were not assaulted and abused. We played our part, we tried our best. The abuses continued. Our view was that the prosecution itself was an abuse, and we were vindicated in that view when eventually the conviction by the High Court and the sending to prison for 20 years of these accused persons was set aside by the Supreme Court, and they were set free after almost 10 years of struggling to take away that shackle. So in that regard, ZLHR was successful.
ZLHR has continued to occupy its space at the continental level, particularly with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. We have continued over the years to make statements during the public sessions, particularly on the situation of human rights in Zimbabwe and also the situation of human rights defenders.
So going forward, I'm saying regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of the power that you wield now, NGOs are a necessary part of any human society, because the abuse of power we've seen is not limited to who is in power today. Tomorrow, when you're out of power, you'll need the very same NGOs. To the lawyers who are in parliament, who are trying to interfere, for instance, with the independence of the legal profession, remember that if government starts regulating the legal profession and you are on the other side of government tomorrow, they may even affect your capacity to practice law. So the independence of the profession is absolutely crucial. The right of NGOs such as Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights to intervene where citizens' rights are concerned is crucial, because at some stage, virtually each one of us will require those services.